Hi, my name is Beth Green, and today I'd like to talk to you about moving forward and what blocks us. When I say those words, I immediately feel pain in my heart. I don't know if you can feel that too. It's the pain of how much we know we need to move forward and how scared we are. Now, I'd like to address my audience today just a little bit differently because I'm assuming now that we have people who have subscribed to our channel. They've already gotten to know me a little bit. They've seen a lot of my videos, and we're kind of friends. So I'd like to talk to you more as I would be talking to a friend, and I hope that you can hear me that way as well. Why do I say that we all know we need to move forward? Well, isn't it obvious? When we think about the amount of pain that we inflict upon ourselves and other people, we know something is wrong. We know things need to change. We know that we drink too much or take drugs or are working too much or eating too much, that we're yelling too much or we're too suppressed or we're too reckless or we're too violent. We know there's too much war. We're sick. We're working ourselves to death. We're pumping ourselves up. We're having children when we don't know how, we're overindulging our children, or we're angry at our children, we're angry at each other, we love our partners, we hate our partners, we try to dominate our partners, we feel dominated by our partners, we love our jobs, we hate our jobs. I mean, there's so much going on, and we are so, generally speaking, stuck. If you don't think that we're stuck, all you have to do is watch the news every day. I mean, isn't it shocking? One of the things that I discovered is that many, many years ago, I stopped watching the news altogether. I was deeply involved in my spiritual evolution and in honing the skills that I have today. And I was very clearly guided, don't get involved. Don't watch anything, don't read anything, just stay inside and keep working inside. And I did that. Well, years later, I came out, and it was like I had never been gone. It seemed to me like the news was the same as it was before. Oh, epidemics of illness, starvation, climate change. Of course, we don't have climate change, right? All of these things happening. Bipartisanship is a joke. Polarization in society. Police against blacks, blacks against police, everybody against everybody. And he said, I feel like I fell asleep and woke up and it was the same day. Isn't there a movie like that, Groundhog Day? You just keep waking up and it's always the same. Well, that's what I mean when I say we're stuck. Now, you personally may have made a lot of progress in your life, and I hope that you have. You may have broken through a lot of inner struggles and inner resistances, and you may have found a love for your life, but you may not. You may still notice the same kind of pattern. Maybe you've actually changed a lot of things in your life, and yet you're still noticing that you have the same kind of reactivity that you had before. I mean, before, maybe you were drinking too much because, oh my God, you were unemployed, you couldn't figure out how you were going to survive, you had 5 children or whatever. And now you're drinking too much because you have this high-powered job and it's so stressful, and now you've got to pay for the motorhome that you bought or whatever. Have you noticed? Now, before we go further, I'd like you to take a breath with me and ask yourself honestly, where have you really moved forward, and give yourself all the credit for that. And where haven't you moved forward? So let's all take a minute to think about that. Noticing anything? Have you seen some patterns of yours that you have not moved forward on? I have. And how do I feel about that? Lousy. Well, now let's do the same exercise, but now let's look at our world. It's like, okay, where have we moved forward? We have more compassion for people with mental illness. We have more programs for recovery, where we have a few more medical breakthroughs. But how many people are still really sick? How many people are taking pain medication? How many people are getting addicted to different things? How many people are still eating the wrong things? Look at our world. Are we still hurting one another? Are we still hurting the planet? Are we still stuck in belief systems that are oppressive? Now, we think sometimes that we've gotten rid of them. Oh yeah, I used to think that way, but I don't think that way anymore. Right? I've overcome all of that. Well, have we? You know, we've had like the Arab Spring. We certainly had the American Revolution, right? We've had women's liberation. We've had the Black Power movement. We've had all of that. But how many of us are still trapped inside in traditional thinking that we don't even think about what we're thinking? What I mean when I say we don't think about what we're thinking is we take so much as being true just because somebody told us. Ask yourself, looking objectively at the world as it is, do you really think that we should consider ourselves doing the right things and heading in the right direction? I'm not talking about the government. I'm not talking about them. I mean, I'm talking about us. Or have we really moved that much forward, or are we still trapped in old ways of reacting and old ways of thinking? Now, before we get too tough on ourselves and each other, let's get real. Humanity is traumatized. I'm not kidding. You know, I've been a counselor since 1980. I have worked with countless people. People who on the outside seem to be doing just fine. And then I start talking to them and I learn about their upbringings, what's happened to them in their lives, the traumas they've experienced. And I think, oh my God. And we're not in Syria. You know, we're not in Iraq, most of us anyway. Some of us are. I mean, many of us are still in war zones. Many of us live in societies where it's considered acceptable that women are raped. Acceptable. That it's the woman's fault. Where it's still considered acceptable that women are beaten. Families that still think it's acceptable to sell their children to the highest bidder or to beat their kids up. So, oh my God, when you think about the spectrum of trauma between, you know, those of us who have had horrible personal traumas, those of us who have lived in very dangerous neighborhoods or dangerous societies, those of us who've lived in places that have institutionalized prejudice and oppression, man, I wouldn't want to be a woman in Afghanistan. Hey, I'm sorry, but I really feel that way. So if we look at our world as a whole, and if we look at the insanity about global warming and the denial that people still have, you know, somehow that's unbelievably baffling, we can see that we get stuck in ways of thinking and being and doing because we are traumatized, because we've gotten used to protecting ourselves in a certain way, because we've developed survival habits. I've talked about this before in terms of ego, instinct, and evolution, how our egos are born when we are, and how we develop these survival strategies which are so destructive to ourselves. And it's not just us as individuals. Whole collectives are doing that. Whole societies are doing that. You know, you look at what is the culture of a certain race or a certain religion or a certain nationality. I mean, what is that? Those are ego-based survival strategies. Maybe the survival strategy of this society is to be passive and sweet. Maybe the next one it's to be very militaristic and aggressive. Maybe people are rationalizing their oppression of one another because they don't want to give up the little bit that they have, because they don't seem to have too many choices. You're either at the top or the bottom. There's so many reasons that we get stuck that have to do with our fear of change, our fear that the little stability, the little that we know is going to be upset, it's going to be turned over, and we are going to be lost, and the little advantage that we've gotten by doing it a certain way, we're going to lose it. Oh yeah, I remember when the days of when we were starting the women's movement. Yes, I am that old that I can remember that. In fact, I remember the Ban the Bomb movement when it seemed, perfectly acceptable that we were all stockpiling nuclear weapons. Yeah. I remember a lot of the movements. I was part of all of that. See, and I've seen shifts in consciousness. But what I feel and see is that fundamentally we are still the same. We may be doing a different dance, a two-step rather than the three-step, the four-step instead of the two-step, but we're still dancing. We're dancing to a tune that is so not supportive of us, so out of date, so dysfunctional, because we grew up that way, because we're too traumatized to change, because we're afraid of losing something. What's the answer? Years ago, people asked me, what has to change for our world to change? And I said, everything. And I still feel the same way. Everything has to change. The way we treat ourselves, the way we treat each other, the way we treat the planet, the way we relate to life itself. Now, some of us have spiritual answers, right? Oh, just surrender to God and everything will be okay. Or some of us have scientific answers. Just get the facts. Just do the experimentation, and then we'll figure it out. Some of us are so addicted to rationality that we can't even see the truth, which is none of us is rational. And I hate to tell you that, but it's true, because we're all being driven by these inner demons that are getting us to think and behave in a certain way, and we like to pretend that we're being reasonable. Some of us get stuck on the solution. That's the worst. The worst is when we think we have an answer. And that answer is usually one thing. See, it's the magic bullet, right? You're an alcoholic, go to AA. That's it. I mean, simple. And if it doesn't work, the heck with you. There's something wrong with you. Or if you're coming at it from the medical model, and I just read this 2 days ago, it blew my mind. These people are saying that AA is terrible because they're still promoting an antiquated way of dealing with alcoholism. Now, they, on the other hand, have a pill. And that pill, you take the pill an hour before you drink, and then you don't get the advantage of the alcohol. And so you think, oh, well, hey, this is cool because I'm not going to want to drink anymore. And, okay, yes, AA was very stuck in very rigid thinking, just like we are. I mean, this is the whole problem, isn't it, that I'm talking about? And it found an answer, and that was it. But now these people are doing the same thing. It's like they're stuck in the answer, and they have completely forgotten the millions of people that AA has helped to change internally. Like, you can stop drinking and still be the same asshole you were before. And it's like that. Oh, we should use alternative medicine. No, we should use traditional medicine. No, we should use herbs. No, we should use... More and more, I think people are beginning to wake up that in order to change, we have to deal with the systems that are keeping us stuck. Now, let's take a look at that for a moment. Let's say you were born with some kind of a defect, physical defect, let's say, and then you learned to overcompensate as a way of giving yourself some value so that the society would support you. Okay, that's what the ego does. It comes up with a strategy. So your strategy is overcompensation. Well, let's say you start overcompensating. Well, the other kids don't like you. So they start, making fun of you or doing stuff like that because they don't really like the fact that you're overcompensating and doing better than they are. So now you've got a new strategy you have to come up with. Well, how am I going to deal with the fact that people don't like me? Well, I'm going to deal with that by pretending that I don't need anybody. And so on and so on and so on and so on. So you see, one dysfunction leads to another. And by the time you reach a certain age, you've got a string of dysfunctions. And then you have all the damage that you have to deal with that was from the initial dysfunctions, right? Okay, so let's say that I've pretended that I don't need anybody. So I've built a marriage based on I don't need you and I don't want you to need me. Well, that's going to end up with a very happy relationship. And not only that, our children are going to learn, not to support one another. So all of that has happened. Now there's more damage, more collateral damage. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that what starts out as one dysfunctional pattern turns into a string. So how are you going to change that? Well, you have to see all of it. You've got to deal with your reaction to your disability. You have to deal with your disability. You have to deal with the damage that you've created through your disability. You have to deal with the damage you've created through rationalizing all of the ways that you've dealt with your disability. See? If you are totally honest, you will see this chain. That chain that's choking you, that's choking us. I mean to say, look at it politically. Okay, we invaded Iraq. We had no business invading Iraq because Al-Qaeda didn't come from Iraq, right? But then we had to justify invading Iraq. Then we had to clean up after having invaded Iraq. We haven't cleaned up yet. In fact, we have helped so to destabilize the region that now we have to deal with ISIS. This is the way it is. If you don't look at the totality of the problem, you're going to think there's a simple solution. Oh, well, we invaded Iraq. That was the wrong thing, so let's just withdraw, and that's going to solve the problem. Well, we know that doesn't solve the problem either. You see, there is no magic bullet. We've created a mess. Everything has many roots. Things don't have just one root. Oh, yes, every once in a while you'll find a silver bullet that's just going to fix it. Okay. Oh, I've been very traumatized around men all my life, so I discovered that I've been molested. I didn't remember it. Now I remember it. I cry. I forgive myself. I vent, and now I'm all better. Well, I seriously doubt that. There may be some lucky people that just find that one thing and their whole personality clears up. But I don't think that's typically the case because there's usually an antecedent to that. Like, well, why did you let yourself be molested and didn't say anything to your parents? Oh, so there's a root to the root to the root. And how did you feel about yourself having let yourself be molested? Or sometimes you didn't let yourself, you're just raped violently. I know what that's like too. And what does that trigger? And then how did that make you behave? And how did that make you feel? And so all of a sudden you're in a system of dysfunction. And it's the same thing with our bodies, our minds, our spirits, and our society. We're in a system of dysfunction where people will all come to an agreement about something if you're talking about it societally, even though it never made any sense to start with. Because now you have an entire society based on, I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back. So I'm going to, we're going to go to the whatever club we are. We're going to have a certain kind of a hat, and that's going to give us a sense of belonging. And those are the other guys, and the other guys are going to have their own rah, 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 and so on. And you're in collusion with each other, and all the women are getting together gossiping about their husbands, and the husbands are sitting in bars miserable, feeling themselves aging and wondering if they're going to be able to survive when the saber-toothed tiger comes to the gate, but they're not going to say so. And so we have these socially agreed upon, multi-rooted, dysfunctional, collective patterns. And you ask yourself, why is it hard to change? Well, it's obvious. A, we feel our survival is at stake because we have these old patterns that we developed to survive. B, they're often socially agreed upon, or we hang out with people who are going to agree with us on these dysfunctional patterns. And see, we've lost track even of why we started what we did. It may have started in the womb. We don't even know where it came from. And D, we start having collateral damage. We don't know how to get out of it. Moving forward sounds great, doesn't it? Oh yeah, just move forward. I mean, claim your power and move forward. Oh, did I forget that there's somebody in my family or in my social group or in my society who doesn't want me to claim my power and move forward because it's going to make them look bad? You mean when somebody says racism is a bad thing and they're white, doesn't that kind of blow the cover on everybody else? Or when a woman stands up and says, I don't care what you do to me, I'm going to move forward? Or when somebody says, I want to go to school, but I'm not supposed to want that. There's resistance from the collective. There's resistance from inside. There's resistance from the whole society. There's resistance from the people around us, the people who love and support us. Moving forward, is it really that easy? So what am I suggesting? That we give up and we bury ourselves? Of course not. I was hoping you'd ask. What we do is we admit that everything is wrong. We see what the essence of the everything is wrong is, and we start to fight our way out of the paper bag by questioning everything, questioning everything, questioning everything. I have had clients who had serious molests, who felt that that was what had devastated them and they never healed. And when I worked with them, I discovered that the real issue was that they had cooperated, or that they had felt some pleasure, or something like that, they felt guilty. Well, nobody had ever questioned that. Nobody had said to them, did you participate? They were so busy trying to make the person feel good. Oh, it's not your fault. Well, of course it isn't your fault. But it's like, well, did you participate? It's like, oh, yeah, well, I felt ashamed of that. And because I felt ashamed of that, then I had to really hate myself, and I couldn't speak up, and I couldn't question everything. So even in something as what you think is so obvious, well, you think you do? How many times has somebody come to you and said, oh, I can't stand my boyfriend anymore, you know, he beats me, he's awful, he's, you know, and how many of you have said, oh my God, that's awful, why don't you leave the bum? And that's the conversation. And then you look at the person and she's still there, or he's still there in that relationship, and you say, how did that happen? Well, maybe you didn't question that person closely enough. And what is your part? And why are you there? And what's going on with you? We collude, we collude, we collude. We don't question, we collude. How many of us have just assumed that our children should work for the highest grades possible, or that it's really important for them to do well in sports, or have assumed other things about one another that we don't question? How many of us have assumed that we should actually earn more money than our parents? How many assumptions have you made about your life? Now, I'm going to give you a chance to stop and think about it. Just take a moment and think about some of the things that you assume are true. There is a God. There isn't a God. It can be anything. You can't fight City Hall. You've got to fight City Hall. You shouldn't take medication. The only thing that's safe is what a doctor has prescribed. I'm safer with my family than with strangers. I'm safer with strangers than with my family. War is the only answer. You should never use force. Blacks dance better than whites. Whites have more ambition. We have power over everything. We have power over nothing. I should be a certain way. I should look a certain way. I should wear pants instead of dresses if I'm a man. I should comb my hair in the morning. Everyone should have an equal voice. Mine is the only sane voice that should be heard. Think about it. Think about your assumptions. God knows what she's doing. God doesn't know what he's doing. I'm surrounded by angels. I'm surrounded by devils. I could go on for days. Question everything. That's number one. Realize that we're all damaged. That's number two. I've already talked about that. Realize that there's many roots to every problem. And we've got to start pulling ourselves up by many roots, if not all. You see, if you think about pulling out a plant, you pull it out, and it's stuck, and then you don't have to pull out every root like one at a time. You get a certain momentum, and then you can yank it out. You know what I mean? But you've got to yank out all the roots. You can't move down the railroad tracks if your ass is still at the station. There's no simple answers. The only way to change and move forward is to admit all of these things that I'm talking about, to admit how damaged we are, admit how irrational we are, admit how tough it is, admit that we are a system of dysfunction that we need to work on many levels. We need to work on our bodies, we need to work on our minds, we need to work on our spirits. And it does take time. You may be one of those seekers who thinks that there is an easy way, but if you find it, don't even bother letting me know. I could be bombarded by comments from people who are going to convince me that there is a simple answer and they know what it is. I'm too old to spend my time on that. I would rather look honestly at what we know, at the tools that we have, pick up every tool that I've got, admit that I am the silver bullet because I'm the only one who can coordinate all of the different healing that I have to do. If you come to me for counseling, you are going to get amazing insight, but it's not going to fix you. It's going to give you another tool, and another tool, and another tool, and another tool. And you take those tools, and we take these tools, and we begin to address the system, and we begin to address the ego that is running these systems. And I ask you to read Ego, Instinct, and Evolution, which is the introduction to my book, Living with Reality. You can get it free by joining my mailing list. Go to bethgreen.org. You get that book. Start understanding how the ego is keeping all of this together, keeping us in denial of what we're doing, keeping us defending, keeping us scared. And let's move forward together. Not by denying any aspect of reality, but by bringing them all together. The spiritual dimension, the physical and material, the mental, the emotional, and whatever other dimension there is that I don't know. I'm not giving up. We need to move forward. Let's do it together.